post getting deleted because it's a really important week for Tamil people, and it was also the week that my dad passed away last week. So not last week, but it was a year anniversary. So in that sense, it's very important that it is a week of remembrance. And I know you want this to be a makeup tutorial, but you're not going to get that from me. Not yet. So I found my dad's book, The Monetary Exploitation. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is the censorship towards the Tamil people for their Remembrance Day is a start to, I think, what can happen and affect a lot of people around the world, and how we deal with things and what we're going to stand for and put up with. So, we can focus. Somebody wrote to me going, why do you always have to be a Tamil? And I don't have to be a Tamil. When I post about fucking Christmas, nobody's deleting it, and I'm neutral there, and I'm not saying, oh, you can only appreciate Christmas if you're a Tamil or somebody else. So I think that's a really it got me thinking about the reductive nature of everything, and how people want to put it in a box and be like, oh, you're only talking about this because you're a Tamil, and it's like, no. But this is why I wanted to talk about this book, The Monetary Exploitation, because this is what we're really going through. The Civil War is a byproduct of lots of imbalances which were caused by something that was age-old, thousands of years old, or hundreds of years of conflict, and yeah, we can fight about whether I can post a picture on Instagram right now of a flower and whether that's deemed acceptable by any community on social media, by 2 billion people that Mark Zuckerberg has access to. And we can fight over this flower and this picture, or me posting an image of the Tamil newsreader who was violently murdered and filmed and broadcasted on international mainstream media all across the world. So to give context to ignorance, and I think why the fear of suppressing resistance or remembering resistance and censorship is happening, and how this is supposed to taint the way you think about the way you would resist today, and the things that do need to be resisted. And you might think that this example is only applicable to Tamil people, but it just shows the level of dilution of your own, in your own lifetime. This only happened 10 years ago. And the fact that it's diluted from you being able to post a Tamil flag or a tiger flag, images of the war or the violence, and then you boil it down to a flower, and two colors, which is red and yellow, and even that is not allowed, or lighting a candle in the streets. So in Sri Lanka, they're destroying these plants, and the actual, the fiery gloria plant itself, which is nature, is being cut down and destroyed in the time where the rest of the world is going through COVID, and we're celebrating the moment we get to appreciate nature and to invest time in that. So even in that sense, the technocrats who are now also our doctors, who are trying to fight for life and to save our lives and to save nature and climate change and, you know, the destruction of trees and animals and wildlife, etc. How do they support something that is an entity who would destroy nature just because it symbolizes like the perpetual conflict or racism that exists, you know? So it's not even for a good use, it's actually to let them oppress somebody through this act. So yeah, that was really confusing. So I'm going to read you one chapter, which is only like 4 pages long from my dad's book, but this really explained it. And I think this, it's talking about the problems we are facing now, which is unemployment, hunger, poverty, you know, the inequality of wealth and exploitation of human resources. So my dad wrote this book in the 90s, all right? The humanities' march towards a just global order has run into a considerable difficulty. Serious reservations have risen in realizing what is being attempted as New World Order. The present moves to stabilize a New World Order in the name of peace and security have failed to make a beneficial impact on the lives of the millions of people yearning for a decent life and to win the confidence of a vast section of humanity. This book is called Monetary Exploitation. The factors that have obstructed the emergence of a just global order need to be identified and their deceptive, corruptive influence eliminated so that the impediments can be ended, paving the way for the emergence of a just global village that can be shared and cherished by all humanity. The identification of monetary exploitation as the prime cause that holds back the coming together of humanity will pave the way for institutions of programs for ending the present impasse and facilitate the harmonious and stable integration of global community in a new relationship of brotherhood and equal sharing. The continued expansion of the global economy in the post-colonial period is based on the strategy that benefits of colonialism could be extracted through monetary exploitation without the hustle of directly oppressing the people through colonial rule. Monetary exploitation is the process in international relations where one or group of countries gang up to impose their will on weaker countries and devalue their national currencies while forcing them to keep the economy open for acquisition and exploitation. The institution and stabilization of a new global order that facilitate the smooth flow of benefits of monetary exploitation has been pursued by Western countries with singular obsession as the term of a free world order that was to provide security and bring development to poor countries. Economic theories were framed to justify the position that only by subjecting to the term of monetary exploitation, development and prosperity are possible for the underdeveloped countries. So he wrote this in the 90s, and we're here now to really understand this. The consequences of monetary exploitations are far-reaching. It has been the primary instrument through a new colonial relationship came to be established and perpetuated in the post-colonial period, binding people and nations in an inhumane, unhealthy relationship. The opportunity for the imposition of serious disabilities through monetary exploitation in a way of establishing a prosperous, secure life for people enabled the continuation and expansion of the colonial exploitative relationship in different forms and shapes, defining the relationship of nations in the modern era. My dad wrote this book, somebody asked. Right. Building on the colonial giants through the legitimization and institutionalization of monetary exploitation, Western nations accumulated wealth by the appropriation of values and resources from former colonial territories in a more devious and subtle ways than they did during colonial times. Through the First and Second World Wars, the US placed itself at the helm of the European colonial powers in the relationship that would enable her to impose her will on the global order that came to be shaped by European powers. This enabled the US to yoke successfully the decolonized free world in a relationship of monetary exploitation by building on the exploitative monetary relationship that existed between the colonial powers and their colonies. This move of the US consolidated stabilized the New World based on monetary exploitation, with the US at the helm now. The colonial monetary relationship that facilitated monetary exploitation and oppression of the colonies was raised into a new level of engagement to provide the foundation of a new global order, facilitating the new regime of exploitation and permanent disabilities on nations. This imposed the fatalism of a different kind of decolonized nations that earnestly looked forward to a new future. The IMF and the World Bank emerged as the foremost institution in the institutionalization of the dehumanizing scheme of monetary exploitation. The UN, as an institution, established to oversee a new world order, maintaining world peace and sustain a global economic system, has emerged as a major international forum that helped stabilization of the new regime of exploitation. Through nationalism and communism, by asserting self-reliance and equality, resisted the imposition of the regime of monetary exploitation with the collapse of the Soviet Union that provided the leadership of the resistance. The regime of monetary exploitation came to engulf the entire globe in a new way of globalization, taking advantage of the earnest desire of people and nations for dignity and development. The increased destabilization and the emergence of terrorism as a means to express the inalienable rights of people and the looming threat of disintegration of the global order. It cannot be divorced from the disintegrative pressure monetary exploitation imposes on a global situation. The invisibility of the mechanism of monetary exploitation, the root cause of global frustration generating hate, suspicion, distrust, and strife among nations. The global economic order and its negative impact have come as great disappointment to millions of people. This is little hope there is little hope that under present conditions, the vulnerability and the destitution will come to an end. The global emergency has risen in three fronts. These are: 1, sharing of finite resources; number 2, environmental degradation; and number 3, chronic underdevelopment. Unless solutions are found for these urgent problems, the strife and insecurity witnessed in certain parts of the world will engulf the entire world. Without addressing these issues and identifying the real cause of chronic disability of nations and restructure the global order, meeting the global concern for justice, the present order cannot be saved from collapse. The empowerment of people and nations, so essential for their self-preservation and dignified life, cannot be effected without addressing the hidden schemes that impose permanent disabilities on people and nations. The monetary exploitation disempowers and denies people and nations their rightful resources and opportunities for prospering, and is the number one cause of global poverty. Right, so this is what's happening now. And I wish I read it then, but this is the first time I'm reading it properly, where we are living in this time where the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, all of these people have decided this is the Great Reset. And, you know, in this book, my dad's saying, yeah, you're going to need a Great Reset. And or it's not going to be sustainable and everyone's going to die and it's going to engulf the whole planet. So he's campaigning for that. But at the same time, the way we have it now is it needs to be understood in the correct manner. So when you have somebody censoring on social media a picture of a flower, of a time and a moment and a war that did happen, then you have to understand like what we're going into, and whether these equalizing factors in the conversation are even going to be discussed, you know, or if it's still going to carry on being hidden. So this is another thing my dad said. Except for the heat and light from the sun, the world resources are finite. The population of the world has increased from 1 billion in 1800 to its present level of 6 billion in 2 centuries. So that's, my dad wrote this when the world population was 6 billion, and now I think we're at 7.8. It was possible to go around and exploit the world's natural resources by a few Western nations 200 years ago, as the colonized nations did not need those resources. There was enough land, sufficient mineral deposit, and adequate fuel deposit, unused and uncared by the natives, which could be exploited. Colonialism could expand without an economic drain on the natives. However, in the present era, the awareness of the people about the opportunities and the potentialities available to them to utilize the finite resources for their own benefit had increased. The resources had diminished. With increased population and pressure on land and resources, and the increase of local needs, natives started to question the advisability of keeping vast tracts of land under export agriculture while they face serious land problems. It is so with other resources as well. The catastrophic impact of limitless growth on the environment has been fully realized only after considerable damage had been done to the global environment. The global warming and its impact on climatic change have led to the prospect of frequent disasters arising out of natural calamities. The consequences of allowing greed to dictate the course of human history has brought about the necessity to promote alternate paths of development, not dictated by global predatory forces, which take into consideration the sustainability concerns, rediscovering the value of stable civilizations for human survival. The force of equalism, I think that's a good word, equalism. The force of equalism has driven civilizations more than any other driving force. The desire of man to have what others have and to be equal with others is an inherent trait that drives the spirit of man. In an open world, a corner of earth cannot enjoy the fruits of affluence while the vast masses of humanity struggle for their day-to-day existence. The luxury and affluence of a few can bring such pressure on governments and traditional societies, generating envy and discord and disintegration of societies. The pressures of inequality, imposed disability that existed in the world today is left unresolved. It will provide the fuel for the incineration of the clash of civilizations that will see no end in the world. Monetary exploitation remains as the root of all evils faced by humanity. The ability to extract value by imposing conditions of equality and permanent disabilities, taking advantage of people's earnest desire for a just, dignified life, is a crime against humanity, which has brought untold suffering to people all over the world. Monetary exploitation has become a last instrument of barbarianism in its quest for global domination, destroying the spirit of civilization. The realization of the ideal of global village, in which a peaceful, equitable, and harmonious existence of humanity can be exposure of the predatory disposition of the monetary subsequent banishment from the face of the earth. Wow, he was a bit. So that was a chapter. And so I think everything that we're being told today is about take the vaccines, go back to work, save the economy, like you save it, like what do we do? Save the planet. We've been in lockdown for nearly locked up. So I think as a person who is now comfortable compared to practically everyone I know in my life, the challenge of equality, economically, it seems to be like the biggest thing, because the fact that $1 trillion had been made over this last 12 months by a handful of billionaires and goes unchecked. while on the same hand, I'm actually in America while I'm talking, so you know, it's actually quite. Look at the unemployment rate, and um, if you look at the political speak every day, where people are talking about getting as this sort of air of like political leadership with Biden winning, that things are going to return. And first it's like the medicine's getting thrown out there, but then today I read that even if you take it, it doesn't mean you don't carry it, and you can still pass it to other people, and you still have to wear a mask. So the only thing it does is prevents you from getting symptoms, which kind of makes you an asymptomatic carrier, which is what we already are, where majority people are, and that's what we got told. So then, if you don't cure that with the vaccine, back to work, because you will be vaccinated, but then you still are a carrier that can pass it to people who are not vaccinated. So then there will be reluctance for you to get back to work. You look into shops and institutions and schools, I don't know, So in terms of getting the economy back, I really see it coming in the near future. And so then the inequality is going to show even more. And especially in their handout of like one-time payment doesn't really match what's made from the top. So and on the one hand, it's an interesting thing to read this book and say, okay, like it's my dad's talking about Western countries that have set up the structure where all of the wealth goes to the top, and the people at the bottom was colonies who are independent now, but they were kept broken, and they were kept disabled. So the mode of exploitation carried on no matter which superpower took over and which empire took over. And that structure itself is solidified by NGOs and neutral organizations like the UN and IMF, who were there to or set up. They just further stabilized it. So in 2020, to look at, say, America and European countries who are also going through this hit economically, and seeing like the wealth inequality even within this country, is very hard to say, country by country. It almost is not like that. And it seems like it's class by class, and that class is the global class, and the class at the bottom is global. So this puts us in a moment when and how is the tools that we've made, tools that we put so much love into and soul into, how are they going to help us? Like, we were distracted by the fight for identity, but the identity politics fighting the last few years is not going to cure hunger for a lot of people throughout these times. And yesterday I heard that in New York City it's gone from nighttime to daytime. People are free and crime rates rise in moments like this. And the commit crime against one another on a street level, or a proper resistance. I feel like someone's gonna bash the door down right now, come and arrest me in my hotel. But it's true. You're hungry, you're hungry. If you're gonna rob someone for money, then why put that on each other? Because we're never gonna solve the problem like that. So my dad did a whole chapter. The best thing about this book is that after going in, the UN and everybody else, there's a whole chapter of Tamil quotes from like thousands of years ago, one of our old ancient poets, of Tamil society. And my dad basically a whole chapter where he pulls every quote and by this poet on greed and giving and poverty. And nothing is more unpleasant than death, yet even that is pleasant where charity cannot be exercised. I like this one. The removal of the killing is the place for one to lay up his wealth. Deep. The monetary exploitation as the newest weapon of neo-barbarianism. The primordial conflict of human spread of civilized life has been the conflict between barbarianism and civilization. as the hunter-gatherer state evolved into settled civilized life of farming and communities, unsettled pastoral life of nomads, the stage was set for the enduring conflict of two streams. The spread of two modes of life overlapped, leading to perpetual conflict that has continued through its various. The free westward spread of civilization that began around 5000 BC came to a halt by the southward thrust of barbarianism by 2000 BC. And clear dividing line emerged stretching from eastern China to Britain, marked by a web of fortifications and walls in an attempt to keep the barbaric hordes away. The mastering of horse riding and archery gave the barbarians an advantage. The horse riding archery than the chariot riding art of civilization. So true. By 1500 BC, the Indus was overrun by barbaric hordes. The long wall of China barbarians away, and in the West, the perpetual struggle collapsed when it was defeated by Rome in 146 BC, which in turn was overrun by barbarianism from the north. And once the northern and the west of plunder and enslavement and further downward infiltration could not be prevented, and civilization have to fall back on internal advent of Islam. Civilization, barbarianism's driving force has been its perpetual inferiority complex, and this meant a continued attempt to be superior. The destruction and plunder of civilized life would be followed by attempts to foist ideas on the subjugated people. So fucking deep. The inner insecurities and the lack of compromised values meant a perpetual thirst for domination and control of civilized societies. The inherent inability to subscribe life, integrate harmoniously into normative traditions gave rise to barbaric culture of contempt and ridicule at values of civilized societies. The perpetual distrust and racist divide provided the basis for the continued struggle of societies as time went on, a permanent integration into civilized societies that have shifted into hereditary normativism remained difficult for the barbaric tribes. Going further south, the barbaric tribes were a formidable menace. So basically, it really did stem out of that. I do think that ultimately, since independence, we've been at war. And the war existed before then, when other colonial forces came in. Before they came, but I understand the insecurity driving the war culture, and I think that should be addressed if you're going to reset the Great Reset. In order to Great Reset the great world, you're going to have to address this type of shit, because it's very difficult to live tribalism. Yes, the never-ending conflict. So it's very difficult to live in a world where we are saying that we have to reset everything and take great risks with our bodies and our health and all of these things, when actually the infrastructure, we're not fully aware what is happening with that. We are just told top down, take this, do this, shut the fuck up. And if you question any of it, you get called crazy, and you get banned off social media, and you're not allowed to gather more than 6 people at a time in a room to discuss anything. It makes no sense. So I just want to know, who are the 10 people or like the 20 people that you have to trust right now, who understands the world in such a way, like in a historical sense, in a geographical sense, in a traditional, like ancient tradition type sense, where they understand different conflicts in different areas and why they happen, understand the availabilities of resources in what country, who on the planet right now is so good and so saintly that they would be so fair in distribution and governing the world in such an equal manner, to distribute wealth, resources,